And to support it, they bring up some examples
Right.
that are meant to kind of make us question, whether certain social justice movements are truly about achieving equality
Yeah.
or if they might be driven by,
Yeah.
other motivations.
Like what?
Well, for instance, they point to what they see as like a selective outrage surrounding certain social issues.
Okay.
They highlight the lack of feminist outcry
Right.
over issues like the UK grooming gangs,
Right.
where the perpetrators didn't really fit that,
Yeah.
traditional oppressor narrative.
It's an example that kind of makes you think, like, are all social justice movements created equal?
Right, exactly.
Or are some, more focused on specific agendas than others?
Yeah.
And to further their point, Aquarius Wave also brings up what they see as the Black Lives Matter movement's,
Right.
emphasis on white on black violence,
Yeah.
while downplaying black on black crime.
Yeah, I see.
Essentially, they're suggesting that certain groups might be more willing to highlight injustices when they fit a specific narrative.
Right.
Even if that means, overlooking other injustices that don't fit neatly into that narrative.
Right, yeah.
It definitely raises some eyebrows.
It does.
And makes you think about the potential for bias, within these movements.
Yeah, it's important to remember, though, that Aquarius Wave is presenting a particular perspective.
All right.
Right, which may not align with everyone's experiences or beliefs.
Of course.
But it's their perspective that we're diving into today.
Exactly.
And it's certainly one that, sparks a lot of debate and discussion.
Yeah, and speaking of sparking debate, Aquarius Wave also dives into the, the financial aspects of DEI.
Right.
They argue that DEI has become a lucrative industry.
Oh, interesting.
Profiting from, these feelings of guilt and fear.
And they highlight a specific example to illustrate their point, right?
Yeah.
They bring up Ibrahim Kendi
Right.
and his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Right.
The book generated millions in revenue, but it also received, some criticism from some scholars within,
Right.
Kendi's own field.
And Aquarius Wave uses this example to suggest that there might be financial motivations behind this whole movement, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just this pure desire to help marginalized groups, they question whether these initiatives would be as prevalent if there weren't these financial incentives. Pretty provocative question, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It brings up, this larger point.
Yeah.
How do we disentangle genuine intentions from, potential self-interest?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something as complex and, emotionally charged as social justice.
Right?
That's a question that goes beyond just DEI, and applies to a lot of movements and initiatives.
For sure. It's all about, thinking critically and examining the different factors that might be at play.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've heard Aquarius Wave's, pretty strong take on how DEI might be hurting the very people it aims to help.
Right.
By, potentially lowering standards and kind of promoting a victim mentality. They've also argued that it could be more about power and profit than like genuine social justice.
Yeah.
Now, that's a pretty strong critique.
It is.
But we need to remember it's just one perspective, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been, kind of diving deep into this world according to Aquarius Wave.
Right.
But there are definitely other viewpoints on DEI. And, it's the real world impact is actually really complex and has, many different facets.
Totally. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, there's a lot of research and real life experiences that suggest that DEI initiatives can have positive effects when they're implemented thoughtfully and authentically. I mean, we've seen companies become more innovative and profitable when they embrace that diversity of thought and experience. There's even, evidence that suggests that DEI can lead to happier employees and like a stronger sense of belonging at work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can boost productivity and morale.
Totally. And, let's not forget the broader social impact as well.
Right.
DEI has the potential to break down barriers and create more equitable opportunities.
Yes.
For groups that have historically been marginalized.
Right.
Leading to, a fairer and more just society overall.
So it seems like there's a lot of nuance to this whole conversation.
Galatheli.
DEI isn't, inherently good or bad. It really depends on how these initiatives are designed, implemented, and really kind of woven into the culture of, an organization or even like society as a whole.
Right.
What do you think?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
If DEI is treated as just like a box ticking exercise.
Right.
Or, just a way to hit quotas.
Right.
it's unlikely to really be effective.
Yeah.
In fact, it could even backfire.
Right.
And create more division and resentment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It needs to be like a genuine, heartfelt commitment
Right.
to creating a more inclusive
Right.
and equitable environment,
Yeah.
which means, putting in the effort, educating people,
Right.
and being willing to really tackle those
Yeah.
deeper systemic issues
Right.
that are actually at play.
One thing that really stood out to me in these Aquarius Wave videos is
Yeah.
the idea that DEI might actually be widening the racial divide instead of like bridging it.
That's a pretty,
Yeah.
heavy claim.
Yeah.
And Aquarius Wave argues that by constantly, emphasizing differences and focusing on group identity,
Right.
DEI can unintentionally reinforce those divisions and create this sense of us versus them
Right,
that
yeah.
can be, really harmful.
So instead of bringing people together, they're saying it might be pushing people further apart.
That's their argument, yeah.
It's like that old saying, dividing we fall, united we stand. Like, we need to figure out how to celebrate diversity, but also, like, recognize our common humanity.
Exactly. True inclusivity means, valuing each person's unique qualities.
Right.
And acknowledging those things that connect us all as human beings.
Okay, so let's circle back to something else Aquarius Wave brought up, which was,
Yeah.
those financial incentives tied to DEI. They presented this pretty scathing critique of how DEI has become like a lucrative industry,
Right.
arguing that, some people are actually profiting off guilt and fear.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they pointed to the success of Ibrahim Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist,
Right.
which, brought in millions.
Yeah.
Despite being criticized, by some scholars.
Right.
And that example, really makes you wonder if some folks are benefiting financially
Yeah.
from the very problems they claim to be solving.
It's a valid concern, isn't it?
It is when, large sums of money are involved in,
Yeah.
any industry
Right.
or movement.
Right.
We need to be, critical and ask some tough questions.
Yeah, like what?
Who's actually benefiting from these initiatives?
Right.
And are their motivations truly aligned with, the stated goals?
And are they actually making a real difference?
Exactly. Yeah. Are we just, talking the talk?
Right.
Or are we actually walking the walk?
Yeah, it's all just for show.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are crucial questions. We need to move beyond just performative activism.
Right.
And really
Yeah.
focus on creating,
Yeah.
real sustainable change.
So back to our main question.
Yeah.
If DEI initiatives aren't like this, perfect solution,
Right.
what are the alternatives for creating, a more equitable and inclusive society?
That's a great question. And honestly, that's something that's been on my mind throughout,
Yeah.
this whole discussion.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue and, there's no simple answers.
Right.
But Aquarius Wave suggests that, focusing on excellence and individual initiative is key.
Mm-hmm.
They point to, the success of Chinese and Indian Americans who they say have thrived,
Right.
in the United States because of,
Yeah.
their dedication to hard work and education.
That's one perspective.
It is.
And it highlights, the power of individual agency and like, a strong work ethic.
For sure.
But we also need to, recognize that not everyone has the same starting point
Of course.
or the same opportunities.
Exactly. We can't ignore, those systemic barriers
Yeah.
that prevent, some groups
Right.
from reaching their full potential.
That means, addressing issues like poverty,
Right.
lack of access to good education,
Yeah.
healthcare, and, discrimination in areas like housing and
Right.
employment.
So it's about leveling the playing field so everyone has a fair shot at success, regardless of, their background.
We need to empower people to, take control of their lives,
Right.
but also like dismantle those systems
Absolutely.
that, perpetuate inequality.
It sounds like, it's a both hand situation.
Yeah.
It's neither.
It's about recognizing how, those individual actions and those societal structures,
Right.
they kind of work together.
They do.
Sometimes in positive ways, sometimes not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to move beyond those like overly simplistic solutions and really embrace, the complexities of building a truly just
Yeah.
and equitable society.
So it seems like this conversation about DEI, it requires, this ongoing dialogue.
He does.
And we need to be willing to engage with diverse perspectives, even if they make us, uncomfortable or challenge our beliefs.
Right. Right.
What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's through these challenging conversations,
Yeah.
that we can really start to
Yeah.
understand the nuances of complex issues.
Right.
Like DEI. And, one thing that I think Aquarius Wave does well is they frame this conversation in a really interesting way. It's not just about like specific policies or programs, It's about this clash of ideologies.
Right.
A fundamental difference in how we, view the world. And the path to, achieving a more just and equitable society.
That's a great point. They present DEI as like a symptom of what they call a victimhood mentality, which they link to, Marxist ideology.
Yeah.
And essentially they argue that, this mentality is disempowering and ultimately destructive.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's certainly a perspective that's, gained traction, particularly among those who feel that maybe, DEI initiatives have gone too far or have become counterproductive.
Right.
And they seem to be advocating for a return to, a more meritocratic system.
Yeah.
Where, success is based solely on individual merit and hard work, regardless of one's background or identity.
It's that classic, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
But isn't there a danger in like completely dismissing the experiences of people who have faced, real systemic discrimination and oppression? I mean, historical and, systemic inequalities have created disadvantages for certain groups.
Right.
Can we really just say that everyone has an equal chance to succeed and just ignore that reality?
That's a really important point, Simply saying that, everyone has an equal opportunity ignores the lived experiences of, many people who face significant barriers due to their race, gender, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status. It's a delicate balance, figuring out how to acknowledge and address those systemic issues without creating a culture of, resentment or victimhood.
It's like we need to find that sweet spot where we're empowering people to take control of their lives, but without, minimizing the very real challenges they face.
Exactly. And, Aquarius Wave proposes an alternative to DEI, which is focusing on, fostering a culture of excellence and personal responsibility.
Right.
They believe that by encouraging individuals to, strive for their best no matter their background, we can create a more equitable society.
And they use those examples like, the success of Chinese and Indian Americans.
Right.
Along with the inspiring story of Terry Crews.
Yeah.
But how do we make sure everyone has access to the resources and opportunities they need, to actually succeed? I mean, not everyone starts from the same place.
Yeah, that's where I think societal change comes in.
Right.
We have to address those systemic barriers that, prevent certain groups from reaching their full potential.
Right.
That means investing in quality education for all students, creating pathways to, economic opportunities, and dismantling those discriminatory practices that, can hold people back.
So it's about, leveling the playing field.
Right.
Making sure that everyone has a fair shot, regardless of their race, gender, or, socioeconomic status.
Precisely. It requires, both individual effort and collective action. We need to work together to create a society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
So what does all of this mean for you, the listener?
Right.
We've explored some, diverse and sometimes conflicting perspectives on DEI. We've heard arguments for and against these initiatives, and we've, grappled with the complexities of building a more equitable and inclusive society.
And what we haven't done is give you a definitive answer.
Right.
Because honestly, there isn't one.
Yeah.
The best path forward is going to look different for every person, every organization, and every community.
But what we hope we've done is given you some food for thought.
Absolutely.
We've encouraged you to think critically about these issues, question the narratives you're presented with, and, form your own informed opinions.
And we hope you continue exploring, talk to people with different viewpoints, read articles and books, engage in, thoughtful discussions about how we can create a better world for everyone.
Because ultimately, that's what this is all about, right?
Yeah.
Creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential no matter who they are or where they come from.
Right.
And that's a mission worth pursuing.
It is.
Even if the path forward is complex and challenging.
Yeah, I agree.